If you think wars in the future will be fought with bombs and tanks, you are only half right. The other half of the story is already unfolding quietly, but with consequences just as powerful. Because the next war, the war that decides who rises and who falls, may not be fought with bullets, but with roads, railways, ports, and digital cables. It will not be measured in lives lost on battlefields, but in the flow of goods, data, and energy across borders. So let me ask you, what if the next world war is not about soldiers, but about corridors? What if the true battlefield is trade? If you want to understand where the world is heading, don't just look at armies, don't just look at missiles. Look at the maps of trade routes, because whoever builds the routes controls the future. This is not new. Thousands of years ago, the Silk Road wasn't just about silk. It was about power. It was about the ability of one empire to reach another, to shape culture, to control the flow of wealth. Whoever held the Silk Road wasn't just rich. They were powerful beyond measure. Later, the British Empire didn't just dominate with cannons. They built ports, canals, and shipping routes. The Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, these weren't just engineering projects. They were weapons of power. When you control the arteries of global trade, you control the heartbeat of the world. And today, that ancient game has returned. Two giant projects are now competing like two empires laying down the veins of tomorrow's economy. On one side, you have China's Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, launched in 2013, already touching over 140 countries with railways, pipelines, and digital infrastructure. On the other, you have a new challenger, the India Middle East Europe Corridor, or IMEC, announced at the G20 in 2023, backed by India, the US, the European Union, and key Gulf states. Both projects are more than trade routes. They are visions. They are answers to the question, who will control the flow of the world's goods, energy, and even ideas in the next 50 years? Let me paint the picture clearly. The BRI is vast. It stretches across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Trillions of dollars are being poured into roads, railways, and ports, all linking back to Beijing. For more than a decade, China has been building not just infrastructure, but influence. A port in Pakistan, a railway in Kenya, a digital cable in Greece. Each project is a piece of a puzzle. And when you connect the pieces, it shows a map of Chinese reach. The IMEC is younger, but powerful in its symbolism. Imagine goods made in India, let's say smartphones, cars, pharmaceuticals, traveling not through long shipping lanes around Africa, but by train to the Middle East, loaded onto ships, and delivered to Europe in record time. Alongside the goods, imagine green hydrogen pipelines flowing, digital fiber connecting nations, energy cables carrying power. This is not just a route, it is a counter route designed to offer the world an alternative to China's BRI. So here we are. Two visions, two networks, two strategies. Now let us zoom into the story of trade itself. Because to understand IMEC versus BRI, you must first understand why routes matter. The Silk Road of the Han Dynasty wasn't only about silk. It carried knowledge, religion, even plagues. It shaped civilizations. When Marco Polo walked those roads, he wasn't just trading goods, he was trading futures. Fast forward to the 19th century. The British Empire rose not simply because of factories, but because of sea power. The roads they built, from India to Africa to the Americas, gave them leverage. A single narrow canal in Egypt, the Suez, became so important that nations went to war over it. Why? Because it shortened trade between Europe and Asia by thousands of miles. Whoever controlled it controlled wealth. Think about that. A few miles of canal could decide the fate of empires. Today, something similar is unfolding. The Belt and Road Initiative is China's way of ensuring it will never be trapped, never be dependent on others for its economic lifelines. Roads across Central Asia, pipelines through Russia, ports in the Indian Ocean, and even the China-Pakistan economic corridor, each is designed to guarantee that China's goods and China's influence can flow unchallenged. The India-Middle East-Europe corridor, meanwhile, is a strategic answer. It connects India, a rising manufacturing powerhouse, to Europe, one of the largest consumer markets in the world, using the Middle East as the bridge. And this is not accidental. It bypasses China's influence. It creates a new artery, one that dilutes Beijing's dominance. But here is the real lesson. Trade routes are not just about trade. They are about trust. A railway, a port, a pipeline. These are contracts between nations. They tie countries together in ways that cannot be broken easily. When you build a corridor, you are not just moving goods, you are building alliances. And this is why WarIMEC and BRI are more dangerous and more powerful than most people realize. Because behind the shiny images of trains and ports lies the true question: whose rules will the world follow? Will it be the rules of China, anchored in state-led investment and influence? Or will it be the rules of a Western-Indian alliance promising openness, but also carrying their own agenda? Now, imagine the future of Africa. Imagine the future of the Middle East. Imagine the farmers, the tech workers, the shipping companies who will live under one network or the other. Their future depends not on elections, but on which corridor wins. And so, we are not just talking about infrastructure. We are talking about the new Silk Roads of the 21st century. We are talking about power disguised as development. My friends, if you think this is just politics, you are missing the point. This is about your life. Because when routes change, prices change, jobs change, opportunities shift. If India rises as a hub, new jobs open. If China controls more ports, prices of goods may drop, but independence may shrink. If Europe chooses one route over the other, entire industries will be shaped. This is why I call it a trade route war. It is silent, it is slow, but it is decisive. And now, as we step into this war, the question is, who really wins? Will IME deliver on its promises, or will it remain a dream on paper? Will BRI collapse under debt and politics, or will it entrench China as the center of the world? That, my friends, is the journey we are about to explore. So now, let us dive into the clash itself, because this is not just about two sets of railways or ports. This is about two worldviews colliding. On one side, China's Belt and Road Initiative. Launched with fanfare in 2013 by President Xi Jinping, it was described as the project of the century. And in some ways, it really is. More than 140 countries signed on. More than 100 trillion has been pledged or invested. Roads cut across Central Asia, pipelines snake through deserts, ports gleam in Africa, and digital fiber connects cities that never had such access before. The BRI is a giant spider web, and at the center of the web is Beijing. But what is the true purpose? China will tell you it is about development, about building win-win cooperation, about helping countries that lack infrastructure. And yes, it has done that. You go to Kenya, and you will see a Chinese-built railway where before there was none. You go to Pakistan, and you will see a deep-water port, Gwadar, connected by highways to China's western provinces. In Greece, the Piraeus port, once crumbling, is now one of Europe's busiest, thanks to Chinese investment. But look closer. The loans are often structured in ways that leave countries vulnerable. Sri Lanka, unable to repay its debts, handed over control of Hambantota port to China on a 9-year lease. That's not just infrastructure. That's influence. That's leverage. That is Beijing quietly turning projects into permanent footholds. This is why critics call it debt trap diplomacy. Whether you agree with the label or not, the outcome is clear. China is building not just trade routes, but a network of dependency. Countries that join the BRI tie themselves to Beijing economically and politically. Their future policies are no longer fully independent. Now let us turn to IMEC, the India-Middle East-Europe corridor. Announced in 2023, it is much smaller, younger, and less tested. But make no mistake, its symbolism is huge. Why? Because it represents a counterweight. Think about it. India, the United States, the European Union, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all on one side saying, we want to create an alternative. Why now? Because they see the BRI growing too strong, pulling too many countries into Beijing's orbit. They see the Silk Road of the 21st century being painted in red, and they want to paint a different color. The WarIMEC plan is bold. Goods manufactured in India would be loaded onto trains, moving quickly to the Middle East. There, in ports like Dubai or Haifa, they would be transferred onto ships bound for Europe. What today might take weeks of shipping around Africa could take days. Alongside the goods, new infrastructure would carry energy. Hydrogen pipelines, green energy for the future, electricity cables, digital fiber. It is not just a trade corridor. It is a vision of a sustainable and interconnected future. And here is the beauty of it. India is at the heart. For decades, India has been the sleeping giant. Big population, but not yet the workshop of the world. That role belonged to China. But now, with supply chains shifting, with companies looking for alternatives to China, India has its chance. WarIMEC places India in the center of a new map, not at the periphery, but as a hub. Yet, we must ask the hard question, can it really work? Because building routes is not just about signing papers. It is about geography, politics, and trust. China has been building the BRI for more than 10 years, with billions already spent. WarIMEC is still a blueprint. For it to succeed, India must deliver manufacturing at scale, the Middle East must remain stable, Europe must align its interests, and the United States must commit for the long haul. And this is where the clash gets fascinating. China has money, speed, and central control. It can push projects through with state power. But it also has a growing problem: resentment. Many countries are realizing the costs of being tied too closely to Beijing. Debt piles up, sovereignty shrinks, and local workers sometimes feel sidelined. There is pushback. Malaysia, Myanmar, even Italy, countries have scaled back or walked away from BRI projects. So while the BRI is massive, it also carries baggage. On the other hand, WarIMEC has credibility from its backers. When the EU and US put their names on something, investors listen. When Saudi Arabia and the UAE join, the money flows. When India steps up, the world sees a democratic alternative to China's model. But WarIMEC also has weaknesses: bureaucracy, delays, competing agendas. Unlike China's centralized command, this is an alliance project, and alliances move slower. So here we are, one network already built, but heavy with debt and suspicion. Another just beginning, but carrying the weight of global expectations. Now let us step back and see why this trade route war matters to the world. First, energy. The Middle East still holds the key to oil and gas, but the future is green hydrogen, solar and wind. Whoever controls the energy corridors controls the power supply of tomorrow. China, through BRI, is already locking in pipelines and renewable projects. WarIMEC wants to counter with hydrogen pipelines to Europe. Second, choke points. Look at a map. The Strait of Malacca, narrow waters through which most of China's imports and exports flow. This is a vulnerability. If that strait is blocked, China is in trouble. That is why the BRI builds overland routes through Pakistan and Central Asia to reduce dependence on Malacca. Now look at WarIMEC. It connects India directly to Europe, bypassing China. It reduces Europe's dependence on Chinese shipping routes. It creates a new artery that China cannot control. Third, influence. Trade routes shape loyalties. If a country's economy depends on Chinese-built ports, guess who has influence over their policies at the UN? If Europe begins to rely on WarIMEC for energy and goods, guess who gets a stronger voice in Brussels? These corridors are not just concrete and steel. They are votes, alliances, and future rules. And finally, trust. This is perhaps the biggest difference. The BRI is led by one power. The WarIMEC is built by many. That is both its weakness and its strength. Many powers mean slower decisions, but also broader trust. Countries may prefer to depend on a group rather than one giant. So the clash of visions is not just China versus India. It is authoritarian speed versus democratic coalition. It is debt-funded expansion versus multilateral partnership. It is past experience versus future promise. But who really wins? That is the question we will wrestle with. Because it may not be as simple as WarIMEC replacing the BRI or BRI crushing WarIMEC. The truth, as always, may be more complicated. For now, understand this, the maps are being redrawn. Not with guns, but with rails. Not with tanks, but with ships. Not with empires, but with corridors. And as these two projects unfold, they will shape the 21st century as surely as the Silk Road shaped the ancient world. If you want to understand how this trade route, war, could reshape the world, you have to look at the pressure points, the flashpoints where steel, money, and politics collide. Let me take you to the Suez Canal first. A narrow waterway in Egypt, but through it passes 20% of all global trade. It is the artery that connects Asia with Europe. When a single ship, the Ever Given, got stuck there in 2021, the world economy froze for a week. Billions lost, shelves empty, supply chains broken. Imagine what happens when not just one ship, but entire corridors are at stake. This is why WarIMEC exists, to reduce dependence on fragile choke points. It says, why should Europe depend so much on the Suez Canal when we can build a land-sea hybrid from India to Haifa, then straight into the Mediterranean? But remember, Egypt, which lives off Suez tolls, is already nervous. If WarIMEC works, Cairo loses. Already, you see the ripple of conflict in just the planning stage. Now, travel east with me to the Strait of Hormuz, another fragile passage. A third of the world's oil flows through this bottleneck. Iran sits on one side, the Gulf monarchies on the other. One missile, one blockade, and the world's energy prices skyrocket. China knows this risk. That is why Beijing signed a 25-year deal with Iran, pumping billions into its infrastructure, securing oil for the future. Through the BRI, China has placed bets on both Iran and Saudi Arabia. This is Beijing's quiet genius. It does not pick just one side. It builds with everyone. Meanwhile, WarIMEC depends on Gulf stability. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Israel. If that peace collapses, the corridor collapses too. Then think about the Himalayas. Mountains as high as the sky, separating India and China. But through Pakistan, China is building the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Roads, railways, energy pipelines running from Xinjiang all the way to Gwadar port. This is Beijing's crown jewel because it gives direct access to the Arabian Sea, bypassing Malacca. But it also runs through one of the most unstable regions in the world, Baluchistan, Kashmir. Attacks on Chinese workers have already happened. Tensions with India make this route highly vulnerable. Here is where WarIMEC has an advantage. It avoids conflict zones by design, but it pays the price of complexity, needing more partners to agree. Do you see what I am showing you? These are not just trade projects. They are bets placed on geography, politics, and stability. One wrong bet and billions are lost. One right bet and an empire rises. Now let us ask what happens if China wins. If the BRI becomes the dominant network, stretching from Asia into Africa, from Europe down into the Middle East, then Beijing becomes the world's central banker of infrastructure. Every new port, every new railway carries Chinese standards, Chinese workers, Chinese influence. Over time, supply chains bend toward China. You want to export, you use a Chinese-built port. You want to borrow, you go to a Chinese bank. You want digital infrastructure. You use Huawei's 5G lines. Piece by piece, a new world order forms, not declared by war, but built by concrete. And make no mistake, in this world, Beijing sets the rules. But if WarIMEC succeeds, then the world tilts differently. India rises as the hub. Europe secures a reliable alternative. And the Middle East transforms from a source of conflict into a bridge of trade. Imagine Saudi Arabia, once dependent only on oil, now becoming the vital link between East and West. Imagine India, no longer just the outsourcing capital, but the workshop of the world with fast railways to Europe. Imagine Europe reducing its dependence on China while still keeping trade alive. In that future, multipolarity grows. No single country dominates. Instead, alliances balance the scales. Yet history teaches us two great corridors rarely coexist peacefully. The ancient Silk Road versus Europe's maritime empires. The British roads versus the Ottoman ones. The Cold War pipelines of Russia versus America's shipping lanes. Always, one rises, one weakens. Which is why today's trade route war feels so inevitable. And here lies the danger. Corridors do not stay on paper. They touch territory. They pass through disputed land, fragile states, contested seas. Already we see rising tensions. China pushing its Belt and Road through the South China Sea, building artificial islands, deploying ships. India responding with closer ties to the US and Japan. Europe caught between cheap Chinese goods and strategic independence. The Middle East balancing between old alliances with Washington and new ties with Beijing. This is not just business anymore. It is power politics. Some say this will end in conflict, even war. I do not believe war is inevitable, but the risk of confrontation rises every year that these two networks grow. A miscalculation in the Indian Ocean, a blockade near Hormuz, a cyber attack on a port, any spark could escalate. Because these corridors are lifelines. And when lifelines are threatened, nations react with force. Now step back and think about the human level. Because sometimes, in grand strategy, we forget the people. What does it mean for a farmer in Africa when a Chinese-built railway suddenly allows him to sell goods in a distant city? It means hope. What does it mean for a young coder in India when IME creates faster links to European markets? It means opportunity. Trade routes are not abstract. They change lives. They shape where jobs appear, where education spreads, where cities grow. That is why this trade route war matters more than oil or ships. It is about who gets to write the story of opportunity in the 21st century. Will it be written in Mandarin through China's state-driven vision? Or will it be written in Hindi and English through India's democratic and alliance-driven vision? Or perhaps, as history often shows, will it be written in both languages? A messy coexistence with nations playing both sides, hedging bets, extracting benefits from both corridors. Because here is the paradox. The countries that will benefit most are not China or India alone. It is the middle players, Kenya, Greece, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, Egypt, Brazil. They will sit at crossroads, collecting tolls, gaining investments, leveraging both sides. For them, this is not a war to choose sides. It is a golden age of bargaining. But in every golden age, someone pays the price. And often, it is the weak who cannot negotiate. Small island nations drowning in debt, landlocked states trapped in someone else's corridor, workers left behind when projects collapse. These voices are quieter, but they remind us every grand vision casts a shadow. So, who really wins? Not yet decided. China has speed, but also suspicion. IMEC has credibility, but also delay. The world stands at a crossroad, and the maps are still being drawn. But one truth is certain: in trade routes are not about trains and ships. They are about time. Whoever controls the fastest, cheapest, and most reliable path of goods controls the clock of the global economy. And in this century, as in every century before, the nation that controls the clock controls the world. So here we are, standing at the edge of two maps. On one side, China's Belt and Road Initiative, already built across continents, ports glittering like pearls along the seas. On the other, the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, not yet complete, but born with powerful friends and deep trust. Both maps claim the future. Both maps say, follow me, I will take you to prosperity. And the question everyone asks is, who wins? But maybe the real question is not who wins, but who learns. Because history does not belong to the one who builds the longest road. History belongs to the one who adapts when the road changes. Think back to the ancient Silk Road. It made Central Asia rich. It made China powerful. It gave Rome silk, India spices, and Arabia perfumes. But then ships came and the sea replaced the land. Overnight, mighty cities in the desert faded. Caravans turned into ghost stories. The lesson? The trade route that looks permanent is never permanent. A river changes course, a canal opens, technology leaps forward. And the maps must be redrawn. That is what I want young people to understand. When you look at this trade route war, do not just see politics. See the principle in life. There will always be competing paths. One will look strong, another will look weak. One will rise, another will fall. But your real strength is not picking the perfect road. Your real strength is staying flexible enough to walk whichever road opens in front of you. China understands this. That is why they move fast, build quickly, and take risks others avoid. India understands this. That is why they build alliances, cultivate trust, and play the long game. And you, in your own life, must also understand this. Maybe today you are in a small town with no opportunities. Maybe tomorrow a new corridor opens for you. A digital skill, a foreign market, a new partnership. Will you be ready to take it? Or will you sit, waiting for the old caravan that never returns? Let me tell you something about corridors that most people forget. They are not built only with money. They are built with belief. Every nation that signs on to BRI or WarIMEC is betting on the story that this path will take them to a better future. And that is no different from life. You are constantly signing agreements with yourself. If I work hard, this path will give me success. If I trust this mentor, this path will give me wisdom. If I risk today, this path will give me freedom. Your story matters more than the map. Because maps change, but stories drive people to move. Now, some of you may be thinking, but Jack, what if I choose the wrong story? What if I bet on the wrong corridor in my own life? And I tell you, there is no wrong story as long as you are willing to adapt. China's Silk Road may collapse. WarIMEC may stall, but both China and India will still rise because they will adjust. The only way you lose in life is when you stand still, insisting the old road must reopen, even when it has vanished into sand. That is the deeper lesson of this trade war. Flexibility beats certainty. Connection beats isolation. And belief beats fear. But let me also give you a warning. Because every corridor, no matter how shiny, comes with a cost. Nations celebrate the billions invested, but they rarely count the debts. Communities celebrate the jobs, but they forget the displacement. And individuals, people like you and me, we often see only the opportunities, not the responsibilities. If you want to walk a new road in life, ask yourself, am I ready to pay the price? Not just money. The price of patience, the price of rejection, the price of failure. If you are not willing to pay, then maybe the road is not yours to walk. Look at Africa today. Many nations accepted Chinese loans for belt and road projects. Some flourished, but others are drowning in repayments. Roads without traffic, airports without planes. The dream turned into a burden. But in places where leaders were wise, where they matched investment with vision, those same projects changed millions of lives. That is exactly how it works with your personal opportunities. A new skill, a new career, a new relationship, it can become your greatest blessing or your heaviest chain, depending on how you manage it. So here is what I tell my young entrepreneurs. Do not fall in love with the corridor itself. Fall in love with the destination it leads to. If the road changes, be ready to switch. Do not defend a bridge just because you built it. Defend the future it takes you to. That is how nations win, and that is how individuals win. And, when I see these two corridors, WarIMEC and BRI, I do not just see rivalry. I see a possibility. Imagine a world where they connect, not compete. Imagine goods flowing from Indian startups to Chinese factories, from European labs to Gulf markets, through a network that is not divided but shared. Imagine peace created not by treaties, but by trade, where every country has a stake in keeping the roads open. History tells us that trade has ended more wars than speeches ever have. If leaders are wise, they will choose connection over division. Maybe this sounds too idealistic. But remember, 50 years ago, China and America were enemies. Then one handshake changed the world. Today, Chinese goods fill American homes, and American capital fuels Chinese startups. That connection lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. Was it perfect? No, but it proves that even rivals can build together. Why not now, with India, China, Europe, and the Middle East? Because in the end, who really wins the trade route war? Not the one who builds the fastest, not the one who spends the most. The one who wins is the one who learns to turn competition into cooperation. And the same is true in your life. The colleague you see as a rival today might be your strongest partner tomorrow. The market you see as a competitor may one day become your ally. The secret is not to destroy the other road, but to build bridges between roads. So let me leave you with this. When you watch the news and see these massive projects, billions in investment, ports and pipelines, do not feel small. Do not say, what does this have to do with me? It has everything to do with you, because the principles are the same. Nations rise by building connections. People rise by building connections. Nations collapse when they choose isolation. People collapse when they choose pride. Build your own corridor. Connect your skills with the world's needs. Connect your story with people who believe in you. Connect your failures with lessons that make you stronger. And when someone asks you, which road do you walk? You will not answer BRI or WarIMEC. You will answer, I walk the road I build myself, one step at a time. That is the real map of the future, not just drawn in Beijing or New Delhi, but drawn in your choices, in your courage, in your willingness to adapt. Remember, corridors are temporary, but the human spirit to build, to connect, to dream, that is permanent. So do not just watch this trade route war. Learn from it. Take its lessons. And then go and win the only war that truly matters. The war against your own limitations.
Scattamo stanotti, viri come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotti, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Gira musica, gira e non si ferma, come una galla do vento aità. Attira con narina, tamburello e abbacia come sua figliola. Scattamo stanotte, viri come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotte, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Sinni e Tunu, i voti si danno, Tuna poco gli peputia. Sindaff e Tunu, i cappotti russi e si ricordano da notti buona. Scattamo stanotte, vini come balla, sutta e fanali chi si scidica. Ballamo stanotte, salta come un'anna, chi pettini di luna in sciolla. Vire